Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. In this Tupperware right here, I have a neon-headed day gecko, and I'll be quite honest, I thought that the gecko was actually no longer alive. In my last episode, I tore down the gecko's old enclosure, and to my surprise, the gecko was sitting at the very top of the tank, extremely skinny and most probably also pretty dehydrated, but still alive. Several months ago, I started building my dream vivarium enclosure actually for the geckos, and in today's episode we are going to set the gecko free into its new home. In December of 2024, I bought this 3-foot tall Exoterra enclosure that is 45 by 45 by 90 centimeters tall, and I've wanted one of these enclosures for a very long time. And the dream was to always build my dream enclosure for the day geckos because they were living in an old 4-foot terrarium style enclosure, and it was pretty old. The glass was cracked in a few places already, and the glass was extremely dirty. And if I wanted to build what I built right here, then that would have taken me quite a bit of time, and I just never really had a different option to put the geckos into a different enclosure, which would have meant that I would have had to gotten a different enclosure anyways. So I just waited until the time was right, and well, then I got the enclosure that I actually really did want. Now, getting to this stage actually took me quite a few months, and the build was extremely enjoyable. I built a complete custom DIY back wall. I built some bamboo towers, I added in a wide variety of plants, and I can call the vivarium a bioactive enclosure now already, since I did add some springtails, and I also added in some pill bugs, which we all know to be as roly-polies. I got some very special roly-polies. They're completely orange. They are all running around inside here and doing their job, and the only thing that is actually still missing is the day gecko. But I thought to myself, before I actually add in the gecko, I'm going to show you guys exactly how I set up this vivarium, and I'm going to take all of the previous videos on the build and I'm just going to stitch them all together for you guys to watch. And well, stay tuned till the end of the video where we add in the day gecko. There are still 1 or 2 things that I still have to do. There's a hole in the top mesh underneath the lights that I still need to close up. The gecko can definitely get through all of that, but I would say let's kick the video off with the start of the vivarium. As you guys can maybe see, I've already got 2 pieces of wood inside the terrarium. I've been sitting for days and just been trying to plan out what I want to do, how I want to do it, and I still need quite a bit of space in the foreground, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I would say, let me just, well, get the terrarium down off this wanky little table. I need to put it onto its back, and we start adding some spray foam. It's the next day and the foam is cured, it's all hard, and it expanded way more than I actually, well, anticipated or expected. I knew from everyone else saying that it actually expands a lot, but yeah, this expanded way more than what I would like. The pots also moved around a little bit instead of, especially this pot over here, it's tilted way more to the front than I would like. We will have to see. I'm just gonna, carve away quite a bit of foam. to move everything a little bit further back again. For the carving, I'm going to just be using a razor scraper. This one here, very, very cheap, and just a cutting knife for cutting away quite a bit of foam. And the main reason to carving away quite a bit of foam as well is to expose the rough foam underneath all the smooth foam, so that the silicone that I'm going to be adding afterwards can actually stick properly to the foam. The smooth surface of the foam is not going to allow the silicone to properly adhere to it. By carving the foam as well, you can also just put in way more detail and, well, give it a more of a stone texture look instead of the, well, bubbly spray foam look. So I'm just going to go and carve away. The back wall is ready for the next step. As you guys can see, I took off quite a bit of spray foam. I also drilled my drainage holes for all the pots already, so that there's not going to be any standing water inside of the pots. I got all the substrate ready. I have some coarse cocoa fiber, I have some fine cocoa fiber, and I have some sphagnum moss, and I got all of my silicone here next to me. I am using some aquarium safe silicone. This is also just going to be good for the terrarium as well. This is going to be the most messiest part of the entire build, working with the silicone, smearing it all around. I'm going to be covering all of the exposed spray foam with silicone, and then I'm going to be adding on the different types of substrate and going to cover it all, pat it all down just to give it a nice secure hold, and then I'm going to let the silicone cure for at least 24 hours, just so that I'm extremely sure that the silicone is cured and that the substrate is fully adhered on there, and then the back wall is going to be done. A whole week has actually gone by. As you guys can maybe tell from my facial hair, it has changed quite dramatically, but it is technically all done. As you guys saw on the second day, I still added a little bit more silicone on some exposed areas that weren't covered with sphagnum moss and cocoa fibers, so I still added a bit more here and there. There were a few areas, and unfortunately, it's also not perfect. On a few places you can still somewhat see the silicone. I did expect the cocoa fiber to be, well, a little bit of a thicker layer on the silicone, but I think the one cocoa fiber that was quite fine, I ground it up a little bit too fine, and that just covered the silicone in a very, very fine powder instead of actually, well, bigger chunks. And well, I'll just have to see how it'll hold up over the time. But for the places where the silicone is, well, it's somewhat visible, I am going to be covering all of that up with a secret ingredient that I'll show you guys a little bit later. But for now, I need to do quite a bit of cleanup. When I was, well, rubbing the silicone all over the show, it was quite messy. And yeah, there's a lot of silicone that ended up on the glass on the side. I'm going to go and scrape off all the silicone on the glass with the razor scraper. And there's a lot of silicone on the wood itself as well that I so, well, carefully put on there. And trying to get that off by hand is just not going to be a thing. So I bought 2 of these small little Dremel bits. These are just small metal wire brushes, and I'm just going to go over the wood with these metal brushes and try and brush all the silicone off that I put on there and hopefully clean up the wood a little bit, expose the wood a little bit more. But yeah, I would say let's start cleaning up all the silicone and then the back wall is done. Okay, got the window frost on and it turned out better than I actually expected. It still lets in a bit of light through the sides. The spray foam is still a little bit visible, but where the vivarium is going to be sitting at the end of the day, I hope it's not going to be too visible. If it is, I will most probably paint over it with some black paint. It's most probably only going to be this side here. Otherwise, I very much like that it encloses the space a little bit, but still is a little bit see-through. Anyways, now it is time to add in some bamboo, and I should have maybe have thought about this a little bit earlier in the whole process when I started creating the back wall. It does protrude quite a bit into the vivarium, and I don't want to block too much of the living wall with all of the bamboo, so I'm going to see what I can create. The day geckos don't necessarily need bamboo in their enclosure, but where the geckos come from is the northern part of Madagascar, and they are lush bamboo forests, which they call mostly their home, and I want to obviously add in some bamboo just to make it it as naturally as possible for them, especially since I already have bamboo in my old vivarium and I love watching the geckos just jump around on the bamboo. They are perfectly adapted to live on bamboo, and also they live in the cracks of bamboo, lay their eggs, they raise their young. So definitely want to add in some bamboo. Now I did go out to my local garden center and I got a variety of bamboo. I got this very, very thick one over here. This one would be quite cool for them to live in, especially if I drill a few holes into it. But it is very, very big. And then I have a few smaller ones that I'm just going to try and scatter around or try and place in somewhat of an island composition. And well, this is just going to let them just jump around a little bit. Before I actually started off this build, I actually did look at a lot of pictures of the bamboo forests of Madagascar. One picture actually caught my eye quite a bit, and I want to try and recreate that. Plus, Exoterra actually makes a fake bamboo enclosure for these type of geckos. Though I don't want to do anything fake, I want to add in some real bamboo. And well, my ceiling is right above me, and with the lengths that I have, these aren't going to fit into the vivarium and underneath my roof, so I most probably need to chop them a little bit, or I'm going to put the vivarium onto the ground and then place them inside to see what I can create. Once I have all of the lengths together that I think will look quite cool, that's when we can, well, secure everything together with some spray foam and some silicone. But let's first get to actually measuring out what I actually need and, well, go from there. Okay, so I just chopped off a piece from the big bamboo, and as you guys saw, I was sort of hanging it in the middle of the air, and that's because I don't want the bamboo to be at the very, very bottom of the tank. That's where the false bottom is going to be, and I don't want the bamboo to be below the substrate line, be down there where all the water is going to gather up in the false bottom and slowly but surely just rot away. So roughly around about there is where the false floor is going to be, and in order to, well, keep everything in place, I am going to be adding the false floor just temporarily. So I'm just going to add in the false floor quickly, and then we can place the bamboo onto that and have a rough estimate of where every piece is going to go. It is the next morning, and yesterday I had a little bit of a creativity block and didn't really know how to continue further with the bamboo. So I asked my wife for her opinion, and well, this is what she basically came up with, and I very much like the way the look of it. It's, well, instead of just one little island of bamboo, there's actually two separate ones now, and yeah, I really like what she basically came up with, especially with the one bamboo also just going sideways through the vivarium. It's also going to break up the straight lines. Now, at the moment, all of the bamboo pieces, they are pretty much just loose standing around inside. The one little island on the side here, my wife actually helped me to glue it a little bit in place using the good old cotton wool and liquid super glue method, but it is all still a little bit wonky and, well, not really fixed together. So in order to keep everything a little bit more locked down, I'm going to use the same method that I used to create the back wall on the vivarium, and that is to use some spray foam just to, well, make a little bit of a base for the bamboo. It's going to lock the pieces all together in the bottom, and it's also just going to give me some form of a little bit of a base so that the bamboo can actually, well, stand straight once I actually fill up the substrate all around it. But I would say let's get going with the spray foam. It's going to take a little bit of time to dry, then I can carve everything down a little bit, and hopefully everything's going to be nice and secure. And Another day has gone by and the spray foam basis with the bamboo inside is completely cured. It is rock solid and hard. As mentioned yesterday, there were still a few places that were a little bit tacky. So yes, now it's all done, and I want to do the same as I did with the back wall of the terrarium, and that is cover up all the exposed spray foam with silicone and then cover the silicone with some dried up media like sphagnum moss, cocoa fiber, and maybe some aqua soil. But I think I'm just going to cover it up with some dried up cocoa fiber, since these bases are basically going to be inside the soil of the terrarium, and if they do tend to stick out a little bit, I just want to make it look a little bit natural in case it does, well, stand out of the soil in the future. Though this is always one of the most messiest parts, covering everything up in silicone. So I'm going to get some gloves on, cover everything up in some silicone, and then dunk it into the bucket here that I have, well, my dried up substrate. And the substrate needs to be completely dry, otherwise it's not really going to stick to the silicone. But as I was saying, let me get the gloves on and get this all done, and then I would say the, well, bamboo skyscrapers are technically all done then. And then yeah, it's just one more thing I can tick off the list for the vivarium. The cupboard is done. It is completely painted black, and I also still added one layer of wood glaze on the front and on the top. At least the wood is a little bit protected from any sort of water that might leak onto it, but it's done. Now, the next thing I need to do is actually drill a few holes into the bamboo, especially the big one right here, and maybe into this one right here, so that the geckos can actually get into the bamboo. They like to live inside the bamboo, lay the eggs there, and raise their young. There are no openings at the moment, so I'm going to place the bamboo back into the vivarium, just roughly where they should be in the final layout, and just mark a few holes. And then I'm going to take my Dremel or my drill, just drill a few holes into them. Then we can add in the false bottom again and start adding in the substrate. Place these back inside, and then get all of the smaller pieces of bamboo that are sort of running vertical inside here. I need to silicone them to the glass and add a bit of substrate onto the silicone still, and then everything should be ready for plants. And I almost nearly forgot, I also need to still address this piece of wood right here. It goes all the way to the very, very bottom of the vivarium. I don't need it to go all the way down into the false floor, so I'm also just going to chop it off. That is also just going to make it way easier for me to actually add in the false bottom and to add in the substrate. That one piece of wood there, well, it's a little bit in the way, and as mentioned, I don't need it to go all the way down to the bottom of the tank. It is the next day. I still needed two more things to continue with the vivarium build, and one of them being a bag of substrate, and the other was a dividing layer between the substrate and the drainage layer. For that, I got a whole rolled up mat of hemp fiber. This is obviously going to be completely biodegradable and won't be in any form, well, devastating to the ecosystem. And this I'm going to use as the dividing mat. It's going to keep the substrate separate from the drainage layer, so we're not going to have a complete mixture in the bottom of the vivarium. Yesterday, I also finished off drilling all of the holes into the bamboo. And in order to actually add everything into the vivarium, I first need to actually add the drainage layer and the substrate layer, because I need the bamboo towers to actually be in the final position before I can add in the rest of the bamboo sticks that go all across, which I also still need to glue to the glass. So let's get to do that quickly. These are all of the ingredients that I'm going to be using for the substrate layer. It's going to be a very nutrient-rich and fluffy substrate. It's going to drain water quite well. It's also going to retain water quite well. And, well, what do I all have? Well, I've got a bag of potting soil. I have some orchid soil, which is mainly, well, bark. That's going to be quite good. I have some charcoal. This is going to, well, filter the water a little bit. I'm going to add this as the first layer. Then I have some sand. Sand in soil is also just good. It just keeps the soil nice and fluffy. I have some aqua soil as well. Aqua soil, being rich in nutrients, going to just be perfect for the plant. And I have a little bit of sphagnum moss still left that I'm going to add in as well. That's also going to retain water. It's going to keep everything fluffy. Let's mix it all together. There's no real ratio on how I'm going to be mixing everything together. The main ingredient obviously is going to be the potting soil, and I'm going to add as I see fit. But the first thing I want to do is crush up some charcoal that I'm just going to add onto the hemp mat. And then on top of that, we can add our substrate mixture. Just clean my hands a little bit. I wish the bucket were a little bit bigger for mixing, but it did the job. And I have my bamboo on the side as well. Let's start adding in the substrate. Let's start adding in the bamboo and get closer to actually start adding in some plants. The next thing to do is I need to add in the rest of the bamboo pieces. I have a few more pieces here that I also chopped off at a 45-degree angle. These are going to be against the glass, and I have some very quick drying silicone that I'm going to, well, just plop onto the front here. We can add them in. The other ends also need to go into the back foam wall still, so I need to make a few cuts there. But once these are in, we can continue. Okay, I got all of the diagonal pieces in, but I'm waiting for glue to dry. It's gonna take a little bit of time, so yeah, I'm just gonna be standing here until it is actually cured. A few more days have gone by since I added in the substrate and all of the bamboo to the vivarium. I did try to remove all the, well, visible white silicone that I used to glue in all of the diagonal pieces, though it is still a little bit visible, but I don't mind. Once I have the plants inside, it's going to hopefully become a little bit more invisible. But as you guys can see, I have all of the plants in front of me. Now, I'm no expert on terrestrial plants, but I'll name all of the plants right here. And I'll also put all of the names of the plants down in the description. I also want to give a huge shout out to the Beef Jerky Official. He gave me quite a list of plants that I could have a look at. And I also have a few right here. I also have a few trimmings of Selaginella uncinata that I took out of my little mini jar terrarium. And it's going to be an awesome little addition to the vivarium as well. And something that I'm quite excited about is this. This is moss paste, and it is finely ground up sphagnum moss, and it contains a bunch of different moss spores inside. And I already mixed up a batch here. It is recommended to soak it in dechlorinated or distilled water for at least an hour. It's very important to do it with dechlorinated water since moss and moss spores do not tend to do well with chlorine. So I used some distilled water and, well, it's been soaking for quite a while and it's quite the paste. But this I'm going to add all over the back wall and most probably around some of the plants, especially the bromeliads. Over time, the moss spores are going to start sprouting. It's going to look quite cool, but it is going to take quite a bit of time. Though before I add the moss paste, I do need to spray it down the entire back wall. The moss paste is just going to adhere better to a wet surface instead of a dry one. And I'm also going to be using distilled water to spray down everything. I'm quite excited to get started and I've kept you waiting on planting the vivarium for way too long. So let's actually get started. There we go, the vivarium is planted finally, and I think it looks absolutely amazing. It was a little bit fiddly working around all of the bamboo. It might, or it would have maybe been a little bit better if I would have added in the bamboo after I did the planting. I did manage, it all worked out, and yeah, there's finally plants inside of the vivarium. This has been months and months and months in the works. In the end, I almost forgot to add in the Salaginella uncinata. I did still add all of it. And I also didn't mention in the very beginning that I also had a few air plants lying around, which I also added. I think the air plants just add that tiny little bit of touch. I also added in the rest of the moss paste just everywhere around. Hopefully that's going to grow. And whatever moss paste I still had left over, I still added in the foreground here on the substrate. So hopefully the moss will actually start growing here. But yeah, it is all planted. All I need to do now is still just reinstall the misting system and actually also install a hygrometer and thermometer, both of which are from Exoterra as well. The misting system I still need to play around with a little bit. I did make a complete review video on the Monsoon Multi 2 that I'm going to be using on the vivarium. I wasn't too pleased with the way that it was spraying. I do think that the piping was a little bit too long. So I'm going to shorten the pipes on the misting system, reinstall everything here, test it out and see if it mists a little bit better. And well, then we are all done for now. So the vivarium has been planted now for a few weeks now, and I'm still absolutely in love with it. It is doing absolutely wonderful. The plants are also slowly but surely actually growing in. I still don't see any moss spores actually growing from all of the moss paste that I've put down, but the moss just might take its time still a little bit. Otherwise though, I'm extremely pleased with the way that it turned out. The misting system is also doing an absolutely great job. Everything is staying extremely humid inside, just like a rainforest should be. I've set the misting system just to turn on once a day for 1 minute, and that is actually more than enough. Since I don't have the best ventilation in the vivarium here, I don't have any extractor fans or anything like that. I don't want the humidity to stay at 80 to 90% throughout the entire day. So with the misting system going on once a day is absolutely more than enough. As I mentioned, I added in some springtails and some orange roly-polies. They have just been roaming around the enclosure, and from time to time I do see a roly-poly, so that is pretty cool. They've been keeping everything clean. A few mushrooms have appeared here and there, which is also quite a cool little sight from time to time. But I would say let's get the day gecko into his new enclosure. He's been in this Tupperware now for approximately a week. I've just kept him inside of this Tupperware here over that entire time so that I can just keep a much better eye on him or her and just be a little bit more direct with feeding, especially since the gecko was extremely skinny. They are spending most of their time underneath the toilet paper here. But I would say let's open up the lid, let's get the gecko into the new enclosure. I hope that we can at least get a few shots of the gecko. He or she is extremely shy, and well, there are quite a few hiding spots in there, especially the holes inside of the bamboo towers. That's going to give the gecko some really good places to go and hide in. But I am talking too much. Let me get the lid off, set you guys up a little bit better, and let's release the gecko into its new home. It's been a few days now since I actually added in the day gecko to its new enclosure. My wife has called him Estragon, and I did mention that I had 2 day geckos, so it would have been Vladimir and Estragon, and those are 2 characters from a certain play. And if any of you know the certain name of that theater play, leave it down in the comments below. Otherwise, the gecko has been very, very active. He's been very, very happy so far, as it seems. I do see the gecko roam around quite a lot, and I do see him spend a lot of time at the very, very top on one of the vertical bamboos. And hopefully soon he is going to get a few more friends, and I do hope that they're going to be a little bit more outside and visible. So far, that wraps up the series on my 3-foot vivarium enclosure. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you guys did, leave a like and a comment down below, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. There is still way more content to come, but otherwise, as always, I would say I'll catch you in the next one.